Good evening and welcome to our webinar, which is part of the consultation for the Sustainable Swords project. My name is Jerry McDermott. I'm the Media and Communications Manager here at Fingal County Council, and I will be your host for tonight's event. Tonight, we will have two presentations followed by a question and answer session. If you want to ask a question or make a comment, please use the Q&A facility, which you should find in the top right-hand corner of your screen. As you can see from the graphic on the screen, we are on the third step of a 7-step process that will finish next March or April with the finalisation of the project. Last month, we opened the second round of consultation for Sustainable Swords with the publication of a health check and the emerging themes and projects. The purpose of these documents is to stimulate debate and generate feedback from the public and stakeholders on what they think we should be doing to make swords better. These themes and projects are the result of work we've carried out and what you've told us through the surveys which were carried out last May and June. As you can see from the screen, the health check contains 6 key themes which range from improving access, permeability and connectivity through to protecting and promoting our heritage and supporting our local businesses. This webinar forms part of the second round of the consultation process that is going to play an important part in the creation of the Sustainable Swords strategy. The purpose of this webinar is to give you some background into the issues and an opportunity to pose questions about them to our presenters and our panel, whom I'll introduce to you in a moment. The deadline for receipt of submissions for this round of consultation is 11:59 p.m. or 23:59 on the 26th of October, and submissions can be uploaded onto the Fingal County Council consultation portal, which can be found at www.consult.fingal.ie. Further information on the project is also available on our website, which is www.fingal.ie/sustainable swords. So, what is Sustainable Swords all about? Well, ultimately, it's about creating good places that promote people's health, happiness and well-being in what is Fingal's county town. The ambition of the Sustainable Swords project is to create a multifaceted approach to the planning, design and management of the town in order to achieve those good places and deliver a vibrant town for all. Sustainable Swords will focus specifically on placemaking within the historic town centre, and it is intended that the historic shift away from Main Street that commenced in the early 2000s will be reversed, with the goal of increasing the resilience of the local economy and fostering an enhanced, accessible, inclusive, child-friendly and healthy urban environment. The project will also facilitate an accessible, inviting public realm that links the natural and historic context of the Ward River Valley Park and Sword Castle to improve permeability and enhance the opportunities for local innovation and economic development. The reason we are all here tonight is because this project involves working in a collaborative way with those who live and work or have an interest in swords to discover what their needs and aspirations are and how these can be addressed through the Sustainable Swords strategy. So, the aim of this consultation process is to identify a coordinated range of pipeline projects for which future funding can be sought, and tonight's webinar is about providing you with more information about Sustainable Swords and answering your questions. Tonight, we've been joined by members of the Fingal County Council planning team and external consultants who are working with the council on this project. Roisin Burke is a senior planner with Fingal County Council and is overseeing the Sustainable Swords process. Patricia Cadigan is the senior executive planner and Linda Lally is the senior executive engineer, and together they have responsibility for overseeing this project, and shortly they will bring you through the work carried out so far. Paul Carroll, who is our senior engineer, will join us after the presentations to take questions, along with James Chilton from KPMG Future Analytics, Nick de Jong from Nicholas de Jong and Associate, who are urban designers, and Kevin Burke from DBFL Consulting Engineers, who are all working alongside Fingal staff on this Sustainable Swords project. Remember, questions can be typed into the Q&A box and as many as possible will be facilitated. Those that are not answered would still be considered in the consultation process. And if we do have any technical issues, do bear with us and we will endeavour to resolve them as they arise. We will use the Fingal County Council Twitter account @FingalCoCo to update you if it all goes pear-shaped, but hopefully it won't come to that. Before we go to tonight's presentations, I'd now like to invite our Senior Planner, Roisin Burke, to formally welcome you to tonight's event. Roisin.
Thanks for that, Jerry. Good evening, everyone, and many thanks for coming along this evening. We appreciate you taking the time to attend. I suppose we're talking about sustainable swords and what we'd like to achieve tonight. And the first thing is, this is your town, and we want everyone, youth groups, older people, businesses, local residents, organisations, community groups, to have your say on how swords should develop. As Jerry outlined, this is the second round of consultation in the Sustainable Swords project. The first round consisted of surveys from members of the public, from businesses, and from the school children as well. Arising from these surveys and our own work are these emergent themes and projects. So this is our first attempt at outlining how we can improve and build upon the existing community and facilities in swords. These themes aren't set in stone. We're using them as a starting point for the conversation. So please let us know if anything's missing or can be improved upon. Swords has developed radically over the years, and it's resulted in quite a unique environment with distinctive parks and offices, residential streets and squares, and industrial and creative spaces. And the built environment we see today has shaped not just how swords looks, but it has a profound impact on how and where we live, work, visit, and do business with each other. So the preparation of this strategy will set out a shared vision to guide future development for the benefit of swords and all its citizens. And this webinar will outline an overview of the projects, an analysis of what we have discovered so far, talk about the emerging projects, and define the next steps. There are 4 key project objectives: to create a placemaking strategy for the regeneration and compact development of Swords Town Centre, to increase the resilience of the local economy, to provide for a healthy urban environment, and lastly, and part of tonight, consultation, collaboration and coordination with key stakeholders. The aim is a placemaking strategy focused on regeneration and compact sustainable development of swords. And key to realising this vision of swords and for our next development plan is changing the way we move around our towns and neighbourhoods, with walking and cycling becoming the primary default choice of citizens because we have made it much easier and much safer. So we in Fingal are working in this project with a number of specialist consultants, including Turner and Townsend, KPMG Future Analytics, DBFL Engineers, Nicholas de Jong, Create, and Antashka's Green Skills. And a number of people from these companies are here tonight to answer any queries or comments you might have. Thank you again for coming out this evening, and I'll pass you back to Jerry now to begin the presentations.
Thank you very much indeed, Roisin. So as Roisin says, it's time to go to our first presentation, and that comes from our Senior Executive Engineer here at Fingal County Council, Linda Lally.
Hello, everybody. Hi, my name is Linda Lally. I work in the Planning and Strategic Infrastructure Department, and I would like to thank you for the opportunity you've given me to present some of the findings thus far in the Sustainable Swords Strategy. So just so I make bigger there, the first slide here is a look at an overview of the study area. On the left-hand side, you can see here the greater swords area outlined in blue, and the red line indicates the study area we're concerned with this Sustainable Swords Strategy. On the right side is just a blow-up of the study area with the red line outlined. Project analysis, what we've discovered. So there's been a substantial amount of consultation undertaken and research, and also we have colleagues from Antashka who are in the process of undertaking a Green Schools initiative and getting schools in the swords area involved with the project, and their feedback has been invaluable to date. The project key priorities are retaining the main street as the core of the town centre, promoting the identity of Swords Castle Cultural Quarter, the need for an enhanced, accessible, inclusive public realm, development of a multimodal transport strategy, and to reduce traffic volumes, culturing community cohesion to promote safer neighbourhoods and reduce antisocial behaviour, and the creation of core recreational and amenity spaces. The key demographic issues are basically that it is envisaged that Swords will grow to a population of 100,000 in the future, and to provide for both a young population and an ageing population, providing an inclusive and a diverse approach to placemaking strategies. So thus far, looking at the research that's been undertaken by the project team, the consultation that's been undertaken, including strategic one-to-one conversations and with different community groups that have been engaged with, and also, again, going back to the Green Schools Initiative and feedback from the students, which has been really invaluable. There's also been online surveys for both businesses and for people living in Swords. So the proposed themes, as in all of that feedback, has been collated into 6 different themes. And this evening, I'm going to talk about theme 1 and theme 2, and my colleague Patricia will cover the other 4 themes listed here. So the first theme is improving access, permeability and connectivity. And I suppose the outcome of all of that research and consultation, these are the key findings that we have discovered. So first of all, Swords Main Street, the environment, is a very cluttered public realm at the moment, dominated by the car. There's very limited east-west mobility and very much underdeveloped public transport. Poor pavement conditions, there's some poor quality frontages, a lack of permeability both within the study area and outside of the study area and the wider catchment area. Antisocial behaviour is an issue, and the lack of a central attraction has been brought to our attention. There are many opportunities for Swords. It's a strategic location, very much a county town with a rural village feel, but also has a very strong sense of community. There is great opportunities for capital funding for public transport and for the public realm. So for Metro, Bus Connects and Swords Cultural Quarter. There's many natural and historic assets for the town, including the town park, the War River, the Broadmeadow River, St. Columba's Church and Round Tower. There's an opportunity to create a more compact, concentric development in what will be one of the most accessible town centres in the state by 27, sorry. So theme 1, here on this slide is presented some of the initial projects which may come about as a result of the strategy. The first one listed there is the Western Link Road. And I suppose the thinking behind the Western Link Road, it would really create a step change in terms of how the centre of Swords is used, particularly by local communities in accessing Swords. So the Western Distributor Road would provide and improve access to Swords for all modes, both vehicular, active modes such as cycle and pedestrian, and bus, but may reduce vehicular through traffic through Swords. Swords multi-purpose mobility hubs to be, I suppose the thinking behind this is that they would be dotted throughout Swords, and it might be somewhere where you could go to hire a bike or hire a car share, maybe electrical vehicle charging point. The Greenway initiative is something we're looking very closely at, in particular, you know, using existing green links to introduce safe green active modes, and particularly to look at linking the Ward River Valley with the Broadmeadow River Valley through town parks. Again, Swords pedestrian linkages, quiet ways, home zones, where really pedestrians and cyclists have priority over the car, and cars are the guests, and that is in low traffic environments. Again, Swords safe routes to school and Swords school zones. As I mentioned earlier, the feedback from the Green Schools Initiative and how students and kids feel and how safe they feel or how safe they don't feel, and their parents in getting to school, that's something we're really keen to tackle. Theme 2 is looking at the public realm and how we can reimagine the public realm. And we're looking to transform the main street and to also introduce a laneway strategy that would help with that east-west permeability and connectivity, to improve the shop fronts and introduce smart streets of Swords. Again, green linkages, green space, considered very important in delivering a high quality public realm for Swords and amenities for everybody. So I think that's the end of my segment of the presentation, and I'll hand you over to my colleague, Patricia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Linda. And just before, and thank you for that. And just before we go to Patricia, I just want to remind you that if you do have any questions for Linda in relation to her presentation, you can type those questions into the Q&A box, which you'll find in the top right-hand corner. And remember, as many as possible will be facilitated, and those that are not answered will still be considered in the consultation process. Now we'll go to our second question of our presentation of the evening. It comes from Patricia Cadigan, who will continue to take us through the emerging themes. Patricia.
Hello, my name is Patricia Cadigan and I am a Senior Executive Planner with Fingal County Council working on sustainable swords. I'm just picking up where Linda left off in terms of the first presentation, and we'll take you through theme 3, 4, 5 and 6. Just before we do that, I think it's worth looking at some of the key demographic considerations relating to swords. The population of the town, as per the 2016 census, was just under 44,500 people. It's a young population with an average age of 32.8 years, which is below that of the state. Approximately 69.7%, or just under 31,000 people, are aged between 15 and 64. And 24% of residents were born outside of Ireland, and this contributes to a diverse community. It's envisaged that the population of swords would grow to 100,000 in the future, and as such, there is a need to ensure inclusive and diverse approach to placemaking strategies, catering for young and old. Swords benefits from a number of opportunities, not least of which its strategic location. This includes its proximity to Dublin City, to the coast, to the rich agricultural heartland of North County Dublin, and to the Dublin-Belfast strategic corridor. Swords retains its rural village feel and it has a very strong sense of community. Capital funding for public transport and cultural initiatives such as the planned investment in Swords Cultural Quarter are ongoing. And Swords also benefits from natural and historic assets, including Town Park, the Ward River, the Broadmeadow River, the Estuary, St Columba's Church and the Round Tower. There are significant opportunities for a more compact, concentric development served by high quality public transport in the future. Just going back to our themes then and picking up on theme 3. And having looked at the demographic factors in the previous slides, it's clear that the growth of swords will require the necessary infrastructure to provide key community facilities and reduce car-based journeys in the future. These may be provided through public-private partnership model and could involve a feasibility study for a major integrated recreation and leisure facility, or a feasibility study for a major health facility in proximity to swords. It's important to state that any initiative would be based on a detailed feasibility study, which would consider gaps in current provision and identify optimum locations for such facilities. Theme 4 is the important theme of involving our community. Swords benefits from a very young, diverse population and has a strong sense of community. The focus of Theme 4 would see the identification of a community-driven sustainability initiatives fund. For instance, the local community in Swords are actively involved in many projects with a strong sustainability ethos, many of which are led by Swords Tidy Towns. A dedicated fund could be established to support key projects going forward. The Swords Woodland Association is another active group within our community. The provision of a green corridor around and into the town centre is something that the group is working on, and this has the potential to provide a Swords community forest initiative. Such initiatives will be subject to feasibility studies and may include environmental assessment, detailed design and delivery. Theme 5 of the study looks at protecting and promoting our heritage. Swords benefits from a very rich heritage which could be better promoted and explored. While Swords Castle is a significant historical asset, it is well known within and outside of Swords. Other important heritage features, including St Columba's Church and the Round Tower, may be lesser known to people outside of Swords. There is scope, therefore, to utilise this built heritage to tell the stories of Swords and to enhance the tourism potential of the town. Some of the initiatives arising out of this theme include the Swords Cultural Quarter, which is a major capital project being undertaken by Fingal County Council and would see the delivery of a library, theatre, event space, community space and coffee shop in proximity to the castle and making use of the important heritage resource of the castle. Swords Stories Heritage Attraction, which I just touched on briefly earlier, is an initiative which could build on the important heritage reserves of the town and expand its tourism potential. St Columba's Church and Round Tower Visitor Experience Feasibility Study is another initiative which could be looked at under this theme. Theme 6 is another important theme involving supporting our local businesses. It has been a challenging time for business across the country as we emerge from COVID restrictions and the continuing uncertainty in relation to Brexit. It's important to acknowledge Swords has a thriving business community, and the aim is to support this community and to capitalise on its enhanced sustainability credentials. The first initiative could involve Swords promotional and branding, which would be aimed at rebuilding the local economy and encouraging a shop local and supporting local services and retail providers. This could look at building on the success of the In It Together initiative to encourage businesses to collaborate and network. Further initiatives will include the provision of high quality town public grounds, which by themselves would also encourage businesses to relocate or to expand in Swords town centre. This provides an opportunity to examine the potential of remote working hubs within the town, which is something that's gained great traction in recent times. The next steps for sustainable Swords. Just looking briefly at our graph here, the project commenced in May 2021 with consultation, schools engagements, and the undertaking of the Swords Health Check report. This round of consultation commenced in September, and we will move shortly in November to commencing the Swords Transportation Strategy and the Swords Public Realm Strategy. This will be followed in January and February, possibly February, by the Project Development Business Case Analysis, with further consultation anticipated in March 2022. We would very much welcome your comments or any feedback you have in relation to the project, and we thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you very much indeed, Patricia. And if you have any questions for Patricia or indeed any of our panelists, please type them into the Q&A box and we'll try to get through as many of them as we can between now and 8 o'clock. And remember, if we don't get to your question, we will keep it on board. We'll pass it on to the team and it will be part of the consultation process. So let's move now to our panelists and our presenters for that Q&A session. We'll switch on the microphones of all our panelists and we'll go to our first question this evening. And to be quite fair, it's not a surprising question. I think it's a question that's on the lips of everybody in Swords, and I'm going to direct this to Paul Carroll, our senior engineer. Paul, the Metro. What's happening with the Metro, and if it doesn't go ahead as scheduled, is it going to affect this Sustainable Swords project?
Thanks, Jerry, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. Yeah, I suppose there's been a lot talked about and written about Metro recently in light of the National Development Plan. From our point of view, the Metro link is still part of government policy, still part of National Transport Authority policy, still part of all the plans and strategies and public policies underpinning the development of Swords and the wider Fingal area. So we'll continue to work on that basis. We don't see that changing. What may change is the timeline. That seems to be what's coming out in recent weeks, but the Sustainable Swords project is aimed at, as Patricia and Linda have have demonstrated there is aimed at, you know, improving the quality of life for Swords, and that doesn't really change with or without Metrolink. There's still a real opportunity here for Swords to, you know, really improve many aspects of Swords, and, you know, Metrolink will add to that, but it's not the Sustainable Swords project and the different pillars that we're working through. They're not dependent on Metrolink.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Linda, if I can come to you, thank you for the presentation again. The Swords Western Ring Road is 10 plus years away, according to our question, the person putting in this question. So they want to know, when will cars, if they cannot go down the main street in Swords, where will they go? Will they go through residential areas? And maybe Paul and Kevin, you might want to come in after Linda has finished answering this question. Linda.
Thanks very much, Jerry. Just to say, first off, there's not an intention to remove cars from the main street of Swords, and definitely not, I think, in the short term. I suppose it's subject to further consultation, and it'd be great to get your feedback from today on that. But yeah, the Western Ring Road will take some time to deliver. Hopefully it won't be 10 years, but I think in the short to medium term, the vehicular access will be required on the main street. So I don't think we're suggesting that from the get allowed on the main street. Maybe Paul might like to come in on that and add to it.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Yeah, I suppose as Linda said, the Western Link Road is a real opportunity for Swords. It you know, it gives us a whole aspect of potential transportation linkages around the western side of the town, and it really opens up opportunities. And what we may try to look at is, you know, people can drive in and out of Swords, but if they're going through Swords, they may use either the R132 or the western route, you know. So it just kind of, it takes out that traffic that doesn't really need to be there. In tandem with that, then there'll be the bus connects, improved bus services all around Swords, and we're going to be building a significantly enhanced walking and cycling network throughout the wider Swords area as well. So it's really about giving people options. And, you know, we did a study recently published 2 years ago now, South Fingal transport study. It found there was a huge number of people were traveling less than 2 kilometers to get to work and to get to school. And, you know, they probably feel that they have to use their cars, and it's the most convenient option for them at the moment. But what we want to do is kind of make the alternative so attractive that, well, you can use your car, but it's a much quicker, a much safer, a much more pleasant experience to walk there or to cycle there or to get a bus or whatever it is. And so it's kind of a multi-pronged approach to kind of give people much more options, and with, you know, as has been mentioned, with a heavy emphasis on those more sustainable modes, which tick a lot of boxes from a safety point of view, from a climate change point of view, from an air quality point of view. And I suppose the bottom line, there isn't the capacity in the road network within Swords to accommodate the growth that is going to happen over the next 10 and 20 years. So we can't just keep putting cars down Main Street. We can't keep putting cars everywhere. If we do, everyone's going to, the place will seize up. So there is a place for cars, but it's hopefully going to be one of a number of different choices that people can make to fulfill their transportation needs.
Okay, Kevin Burke from DBFL Consulting Engineers, have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. Just really to echo, I think what Linda and Paul have just said. That there's a real, we've looked at the figures. There's a lot of people using the car for a lot of short journeys, probably understandably so, given, you know, some parts of the study area are quite hostile to pedestrians and cyclists at present. But there's a real opportunity there for modal shift. I think certainly we do want to increase the the livability and vitality of Swords Main Street, and what we know from kind of international and national research is the mode, if you make the environment more amenable to pedestrians, cyclists, public transport users, well, you'll get the benefits back several times over. So yeah, just echo that. We certainly think there's the opportunity there for modal shift, and it is a sustainable swords strategy. So hence we'd certainly be focusing on sustainable modes. Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks very much, Kevin. James Chilton from KPMG, if I can turn to you. James, what consultation has taken place with local businesses within the immediate vicinity of the study focus area? And can you share with us the thoughts of those who participated with your initial studies? And if you just turn on your microphone, thanks, James.
Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, we undertook a online survey earlier on this year with businesses to gauge their opinions, and we also undertook a number of one-to-one interviews with businesses in the area. So some of the themes that came through, many businesses very positive about swords as a place to do business, and some of the strengths they were identifying, sort of themes of the strengths they were identifying were around the access to services in the area and the access to transport, the growth potential of swords in the future, and the market on the doorstep, and the quality of life of swords as a place to live. But some of the constraints that also came through from businesses were around the environment in Swords Town Centre, which could be enhanced, the cost of housing, which in turn limits the potential for getting people to employees from the area, and the availability of office space in the town centre, and accessibility in terms of public transport to and from Swords. But in general, business is very positive in terms of, with over 60% saying their business was growing and they expected the business to continue to grow. One point that did come through was around the need for Swords to have a stronger identity. So it's seen as part of, it's promoted as part of Dublin, but instead it's actually part of Fingal. And could Swords itself have a better identity and a business identity? And so it's, in general, the businesses were very positive. But there were specific points that came out that they thought that could be improved upon.
Okay, that's refreshing to hear. Thanks, James. Patricia, can I come to you? There's a question in here for you, and just a reminder to our viewers, if you have any questions for any of our panelists, please type them into the Q&A box. As I say, we're trying to get through as many of them as we can between now and 8 o'clock. So, Patricia, there's one here, and I think it's a good one for you. Is there going to be a change in planning rules to encourage people to live in the town? The person who's put this question says they're at an age where they would like to downsize their family home and live in the town centre, adjacent to public transport, etc. And they want to know, would they would need a sort of a sizable property to downsize to. So is there going to be a change in planning to encourage that?
Thanks, Jerry, for the question, and thank you to the viewer as well. Absolutely, just to mirror, I suppose, what other contributors have said here tonight, the encouraging additional people to move into Main Street or into Swords Town Centre is something that can only improve the vitality and resilience of the town. So while there's no change at national level in relation to planning policy at the moment, it is something that we would absolutely encourage within the town centre. And I suppose just to say as well, Fingal is in at the moment in the process of reviewing its development plan. So if there's any particular changes that the listener would like to see included, perhaps they would like to make a submission at the appropriate time as well.
Okay, and if anybody wants to make a submission, you can do it through the Fingal County Council consultation portal, and that's Fingal, it's consult.fingal.ie. Question here, and I think Nick de Jong, this could be for you, seeing that you're an urban designer. Question in here about the footpaths and the road surfaces, and basically the person putting this in is saying that the footpaths and road surfaces on the main street is messy and they're difficult to get around, and will this project improve this?
Yes, thanks, Jerry. Yeah, I mean, there's huge potential in Swords Town Centre. The public realm has a very big contribution to make to the livability of the town, and an enhanced public realm is going to see huge benefits, I believe. I mean, there's a lot that can be done. It's not just the surfaces, although they're very important. It's the overall accessibility of the town that really needs to be looked at the outset. So you probably all know the town centre is very sort of not easy to get around. It tends to be dominated by vehicles. The pedestrian environment is not great. So a lot can be done to address that, both in the short term and in the longer term. So it's trying to make Swords Town Centre a far more pedestrian friendly location, both for residents and for visitors to the town. And then not only Main Street itself, but then the links from Main Street out to, say, the Ward River Valley and to the residential areas and to the schools can all be improved for the benefit of people that want to live in Swords, those that would like to move back into Swords, and for encouraging new businesses. So, yeah, great potential.
And Nick, you've worked all over the place, doing, you know, looking at towns like Swords and that. How does it compare to other towns?
All towns have their own particular problems. Swords is not unusual. I mean, it used to be a vibrant Main Street, as we understand it. It's got its own very particular character, and I think it's very important to build on that character. But it's suffering under the similar problems that most other towns in Ireland, and indeed throughout Europe, have begun to experience over the last 10 to 20 years. And that is really with the growth in traffic demands on the Main Street and the effect that that has on the pedestrian environment. And it's incremental. It happens very slowly over time, but now we're beginning to see the detrimental effects in not only in Swords, but in many other towns throughout the country.
Okay, thanks, Nick. One here for Linda. Linda, can low traffic neighbourhoods be part of the plan for Swords? Towns in the Netherlands, for example, have shown that they can really improve communities. And now we're seeing cities like Birmingham embracing the concept. So is that something that we could bring into Swords?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, everything really is under consideration here, or open for consideration, you know, and I think our sort of focus is really now moving towards active travel modes and walking, cycling, access and permeability to public transport. So I think, you know, that as Paul has said earlier, and through the South Fingal Fringe study, there's a large population in Swords that are using the car for very short trips. So we really want to sort of give them the opportunity to not use the car if they want to. So yeah, I think that's something that could be looked at. I know Kevin is there. That's something he's looked at as well. Maybe he'd like to come in on this.
Yeah, thanks for the question. They're exactly the kind of questions we like. So just to say, we've certainly looked at, as part of this study and part of the context on what Swords could be. We have looked at towns, a couple of towns in the Netherlands, including Utrecht and the Freiburg, I think, or Woben in Germany, and certainly from my own experience of working in London, where a lot of these have come over the last few years. We think there's definitely opportunities there certainly for modal filters and filtered permeability, and creating I suppose a kind of low traffic environment in a lot of areas across the study area. So that's something that I think will probably feature in the final transport plan. All right.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. We started off the questions with one about Metro, and not surprisingly, there's another one about the big transport infrastructure project, Bus Connect. So Paul Carroll, one of our viewers wants to know, where does Bus Connect tie into this project, and is there a plan to provide a bus park, considering that we have a great castle but no parking for visitors or tour buses?
Yeah, so Bus Connects is kind of a citywide program that the NTA are bringing, the National Transport Authority are bringing forward. Right across Dublin, there's 16 corridors going to be upgraded to really high quality bus corridors. And there's going to be a real fundamental change in the way that the bus network operates, and it's going to be much more kind of interlinked services and kind of cross-city routes and orbital routes and all sorts of stuff, rather than just kind of in and out from Swords to Dublin and back. You might, you know, and if you want to get from Swords to somewhere like Blanchardstown, that's a a really difficult trip to make at the moment, you know, but trips like that will be much easier under that proposal. So the infrastructure side of Bus Connects involves, in terms of Swords, involves an upgrade to the existing bus lanes along the Swords Road from, you know, in town in Dorset Street all the way out, terminating at the Pinnock Hill roundabout there at Travelodge. And as well as that, it includes significant numbers of high quality sections of cycle and footpath along there as well, you know. So it's a really good initiative from our point of view. But the bus services aspect of it is a really important one as well, and you know, possibly even more important really in the grand scheme of things. And the focus for the current bus network redesign is that there's going to be a huge number of services using Swords, and it'll become a kind of almost an interchange point between people coming from the city centre to Swords, and then travelling onwards to the further north of the county, onto the towns to the north. So there's a real opportunity there for Swords to become a real hub and a real high quality interchange, and the levels of service that'll be there for people to get around, both travelling south down towards the airport and towards the city centre, and also to travel north to Donabate, to Rushloss, Skerries, Balbriggan, you know, is going to be, I think, significantly enhanced. So we're trying to leverage off that, I suppose, and make sure that the facilities and you know, the waiting facilities, the bus shelters, the kind of the environment that people are going to be getting off the bus into is a pleasant place to wait, is a pleasant place to kind of stop off and shop and go visit a restaurant or do some shopping or whatever it is. So it's a key part of what we're doing, you know, and we'll continue to work with the NTA on that to make sure that we get the best possible solution for Fingal and for Swords in particular.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Keep those questions coming. We're getting plenty of questions in, and we do want to see as many questions as possible from our viewers. James Chilcott, one for you, and maybe Roisin Burke, you might come in at the end of this. James, one of the viewers wants to know, what will you do to address vacancy levels on Main Street, particularly in the buildings opposite the council, County Hall, the council building on Main Street in Swords?
Thanks very much, Jerry. We've undertaken an in-depth analysis of the buildings in Swords and to look at vacancy and dereliction in Swords town centre. And one of our findings is that the actual level of vacancy in Swords is actually very low in comparison to other towns in Ireland. It's actually quite a thriving town centre. We took part in a national study, a pilot town synthesis study, to look at this issue, and there were 6 towns investigated as part of that study, and we looked at Ballinrobe in County Mayo to look at some solutions to town centre vacancy. And I think the issues in Swords with the small number of buildings that are vacant or derelict is similar to any other town in Ireland, and the solutions to those issues are the same as any other town in Ireland. And it's around part of it is around addressing whether the specific issue why that building is vacant, and in some cases it's perhaps that the owner is hanging on to that building and doesn't wish to sell. So it's encouraging those owners to dispose of those buildings. It's around raising awareness of the funding that's available to bring those buildings back into use. But it's also around encouraging demand. So part of encouraging that demand is making the town centre a more livable and more attractive and more vibrant place, a place that people want to invest in those buildings, live above the shops, the holy grail of planners for the last 20 or 30 years that many other towns are looking at. So it's particularly about trying to make the towns a more livable place and to give the building owners that encouragement to bring those buildings back into use.
Okay, Roisin, do you want to come in on that?
Yes, just to reiterate what James is saying, you know, it's so important to encourage the use, make it attractive for owners to use their buildings rather than leave them idle. And another way we'll be doing that is obviously through the vacant site register, which we use through the council. And then again, as Patricia mentioned, we are in the process of drafting up our new development plan, so to encourage broad policies for that can be incorporated across the county, not just to Swords. So those are two mechanisms which we can use to encourage people to utilise the sites that are on the main street.
Okay, and I think, James, you have another point you want to make?
Yeah, I suppose there's one more point I saw recently. I know that there's a lot of, one of the uses and techniques that's trying to look at trying to bring some of those buildings back into use is even the temporary use. I know that the Heritage Council are looking at that at the moment, and I think they have a seminar on Thursday on meanwhile use. So that's the meanwhile use sort of term to bring those buildings back into use, perhaps temporarily. So there's definitely different techniques to look at in terms of trying to reduce that vacancy even on a temporary basis.
Okay, thank you, James, and thank you, Roisin. Kevin, if I can turn to you, in terms of incentivising cycling into the town, how successful has the Bleeper bike scheme been for Swords? And do you think that a model similar to the Dublin bike scheme would be most appropriate to a town the size of Swords, which is one of the biggest towns in the country?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so certainly the Bleeper bike scheme has been phenomenally successful, and in I suppose in a market where a lot of dockless schemes have kind of fallen by the wayside, Bleeper's been really successful in expanding, and I know that they've obviously expanded into some of the nearby county towns as well last summer. I think that scheme works quite well. I think sometimes we forget that I suppose a lot of the real advantages in those type of schemes is that kind of last mile, last couple of kilometers linked with public transport. You know, kind of those kind of trips in you know, outside of just the utility ones. I think sometimes we forget that we've a high, you know, there's a high ownership of private bikes as well in Ireland, and I think certainly what we'll see is as the greenways and the other kind of the high quality schemes come forward, we'll see a lot of I suppose private entrepreneurs as well, certainly kind of piggybacking on that with in terms of their own bike rental schemes, as we've seen around the other parts of the country.
Okay, as I say, keep the questions coming. We're here till 8 o'clock, and we're going to try and answer as many of them as we can. I'm going to put this one to James and Nick. The Ward River, which runs parallel to the main street, is a nice feature, but it is currently forgotten with buildings backing onto it. So our viewer wants to know, how does the panel feel that we can make that more attractive and safer, and, you know, make it a space for people to use and enjoy? Nick?
Sorry for the delay. I thought James was coming in there first. But no, that's fine. I mean, to me, the starting point, it's a very attractive amenity. The starting point would be to improve access to it, principally from the main street. And there's a very good network of laneways, which I think are very underutilised at the moment, which connect directly down to the river. So a laneway enhancement programme as a starting point would certainly help that connection between the two, between the main street and then down to the river. And then wherever possible to make those laneways livable, and in particular the buildings and potential building sites that are overlooking the park, if they can be promoted for development, then that would give the natural surveillance that the park badly needs and would help to enliven the use of the space itself. And then within the park itself, there's very sort of straightforward improvements could be made, such as improving the condition of the footpaths, looking at improved lighting, looking at biodiversity enhancements, so that you know, we're contributing to environmental enhancement as well as sort of physical appearance, and generally making the whole of the green space a more welcoming place. And I think with all spaces like that, the more use that you can encourage to move into them, then the more popular they become. It becomes like a snowball effect. So there's a lot can be done, and a lot that will be looked at as part of this study in order to enhance that natural asset so close to the town centre.
Okay, and James?
Yeah, I mean, so the study is about sustainability, and it's particularly about making Swords a better place to live in, to work in, and to visit. And everyone can see the growth and popularity of cycling, and you know, indeed other forms of sort of sustainable transport in recent years. I mean, a key focus for the council for this, I know for this study, is trying to improve northwest movement through the town centre, and the Ward River is an attractive feature. It's very inaccessible in places at the moment. I didn't know Swords that well before starting on this project, but I know we walked every street within the study area and climbing through hedges to get down to the Ward River. And you know, it's a fantastic amenity in the town centre. You step, it's a few hundred metres, if that, from Main Street, and you're practically in countryside alongside the Ward River. And the extension of the Ward River Park, Ward River Valley, to the west, and up to the Broadmeadow Valley to the north, is a fantastic amenity. And they have the Broad Meadow Valley Greenway to the north. It's a huge opportunity to create an exceptional recreational network that links through the Ward River and through the town centre. And by extension, by providing that network and by creating high quality facilities, you can encourage increased movement, increased footfall, or bike fall, whatever you want to call it, but increased movement through the valley there, which will make it safer in turn. So the more people there are, the more safer, the safer it'll be. So it's, if allied, you connect that to more livable and more attractive laneways, as Nick was talking, trying to improve the appearance and the lighting of the place, and you suddenly create an exceptional recreational opportunity right in the centre of the town.
So basically, what you're saying is that you've found plenty of natural advantages in Swords that you can do an awful lot with.
Absolutely, you can connect Swords. You can connect the recreational opportunities in Swords. Again, it's coming back to that, making the town a more attractive and more livable place. So it's connecting the urban heart of Swords, the historical heart of Swords, to the countryside on the doorstep of Swords. And that's to the west, and it's to the north, and it's even further than that. So there's obviously the objectives aren't fixed around that at the moment, and we're investigating opportunities around that. And any projects that did come out of it will be subject to funding and environmental assessment, all that sort of thing. But there's a huge opportunity there to make Swords a more livable, more connected place.
Okay, thank you very much. Next one, I think I'll direct this one at Linda and Paul. And there's a lot of comments coming in, and indeed I heard these comments last night at the monthly meeting of Fingal County Council as well. But basically comments on why we should pedestrianize Main Street. It would make, according to one viewer, an incredible centrepiece for the town and drive tourism and business. And another saying that they hope that working towards this will be a central part of the Sustainable Swords project. So, Linda and Paul, does the project team see this as being feasible in the coming years, having regard particularly to what's going on in Dublin City at the moment?
Well, I think with regards to Swords Main Street, there's a number of things that sort of are under consideration, have to be considered, and how the street will be used going forward, you know, and pedestrianisation and removal of all cars and vehicular traffic, I think in the short to medium term, may not be quite as feasible as it would be in the future, maybe with the delivery of the Western Link Road. And I suppose one of the primary functions of the street will be, you know, for bus services as well, and that's something, particularly with Bus Connects coming online. So that's something we have to be, I suppose we have to consider in the use of the street. Also, access to existing businesses, and so on the western side of Swords there is existing private car parking off the street, and so we have to maintain access to that. But nevertheless, you know, at the moment the street is dominated by cars and dominated by parking, and we would really like to tackle that, you know, and I suppose we're looking at various different options around that. So maybe in the short to medium term, complete removal of cars may not be quite so feasible, but I definitely think in events and things like that, that's something that can be considered. But I'd like to hear what maybe Paul would say about that as well.
Yeah, no, thanks, Linda. Yeah, I suppose it's unlikely that we're going to be able to, you know, fully pedestrianize the whole thing, but I think pedestrianization is kind of something that can be a work in progress over a number of years, and we're kind of maybe that's an ultimate end goal, but may not happen in the short to medium term. But it's something that, you know, I think the question alludes to it there. Like the main street is a nice wide space, you know, and it is dominated by car parking spaces and by people traveling in their cars up and down and in and out to car parks and that. So a key aspect, whether or not it includes pedestrianization, a key aspect of sustainable swords is to enhance that environment, to make sure that it does become a much more pleasant place to be. I mean, there was a question about the surface on Main Street, so that's another aspect of it, you know, to kind of get the right materials in, to get the kind of high quality urban design materials that we see in, you know, in European countries, for example, to make it a nice place to have benches that people can sit out, and maybe it's kind of, we have little pockets of pedestrianized area, you know, spread along the Main Street or just off the Main Street or wherever it is, but it's bringing that whole kind of urban design viewpoint that the team have here, you know, the expertise that they have and the experience that they can bring from other projects. And so that's kind of what we'll bring, I suppose, and what we want to kind of get the people of Swords to kind of buy into is to kind of change the mindset that, you know, Swords Main Street has been like this for, you know, a long number of years, but it doesn't always have to be like that, and there are different ways of doing things, and I suppose having an open mind to things and seeing what might be possible. And I think, you know, I think we're all kind of agreed that there's a huge potential there, and it's kind of unrealized at the moment. So, you know, that for me, that's what Sustainable Swords is. It's trying to kind of make the most of what we have, and to make sure that people kind of can buy into and support that and get behind it.
Thanks, Paul. Well, we've heard lots of great things and lots of great ideas and that, but they're all going to cost money. So Patricia, would you be able to tell us how we're going to fund these projects?
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Jerry. I absolutely. I suppose from what you've heard here tonight from all of the speakers, there's a range of different projects that we're trying to identify, and I suppose what we're trying to really achieve is to have a pipeline of projects ready to go if funding becomes available. I suppose one of the main sources will be the Urban Regeneration and Development Fund, the URDF funding, which has proven very successful for our Balbriggan, another public realm project that Fingal has been involved in. But I suppose there'll be a range of different small, medium and very large scale projects. So it's to have a series of varying sizes of projects ready to go if suitable funding is identified.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Patricia. Just one final comment from me. We've had so many questions and queries, and thank you so much indeed. Some of the questions and queries that are coming in cover cycling, cover parking, and also covering roads. And that will feed into the draft strategy, and it will feed into what the project team are doing, and they'll be bringing all that to bear when they, as they consider all your submissions and observations as part of this particular project. So just to finish off, we're just coming up to the end of our webinar. Roisin Burke, you might tell us what the next steps are going to be in this Sustainable Swords project.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jerry. I suppose the consultation period is open now until the 26th of October, so we'd really appreciate if everyone could make comments, any ideas they have, anything they find arising from tonight or from the information that's available on our website. At this stage, we have a blank page. We want to know how we can improve SOARS. We want the input of the citizens of SOARS from yourselves and from the organisations and the community that you represent. So that's what we would like to hear. If anybody has any queries, I can be contacted at the council offices as well. So, you know, feel free to get in touch and we can help you. We can facilitate your submission to the plan at this stage. And just to thank everyone for coming along this evening. And we really appreciate you coming out. And I don't know if Jerry's going to say it or if I will, but I've just been checking. So Ireland are 2-0 up so far, and there's only 15 minutes gone. So hopefully everybody will get to enjoy the end of that now this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Roisin. Well, I was fully focused on what we're doing here tonight, but hopefully the video recorder is working. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. If your question hasn't been answered, don't worry. It will be forwarded on to the Sustainable Swords team and will be considered as part of the preparations for the strategy. Thank you to everybody who did submit questions or comments, and thank you all for logging in tonight. I do hope you've enjoyed our webinar, and within the next few days, you'll be able to view the recording of this webinar at www.fingal.ie/sustainable swords. Don't forget that the deadline for receipt of submissions for this round of consultation is 11:59 p.m. or 23:59 on the 26th of October, and submissions can be uploaded onto the Fingal County Council consultation portal, which can be found at www.consult.fingal.ie. Further information on the project is also available on our website, which is www.fingal.ie/sustainable swords. My thanks to our presenters and panelists for joining us this evening and providing us with plenty to consider in relation to the town of Swords. Hopefully what they had to say will help you in preparing your submission. And finally, from myself and everybody at Fingal County Council, thank you for watching, goodbye, and stay safe.